Welcome to yCITIES Inside the Mind of an Investor series. Angel investors are a vital part of the startup community, often a source of funding for innovative problem solvers. While there are plenty of resources about how to pitch or how the process works, it can still seem like a black box as to why an investor chooses to invest or not only to the founders, but also to peer investors. So we decided that we wanted to have many conversations with many different investors, to do it one investor at a time, and with a panel of hosts that reflects a range of life stages, from Shawn, who's an active angel investor at TBD Angels, to Isabelle, who's an investment and program manager at TechStars, which is an accelerator, to Ronit, who's a sophomore at Yale and an intern at TBD Angels, and also a former student of mine. Today, I'm so excited to have Denise as our guest investor. Welcome, Denise.
Oh, hi, great to be here. Thank you.
Can you start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you came to be an angel investor?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I started off as a chemical engineer. I got my chemical engineering degree from University of New Hampshire, and I worked at a startup in which we created various medical device materials and tried to get them licensed and try to spin them off into other companies. That was probably the beginning when I was pitching to angel groups. From there, I got my MBA and I started to work in investment banking, working with startups, companies that were well enough along that they're ready to either do a very big raise or looking for an acquisition. And I did that for a number of years. And then I decided that I was going to try to go work for the government doing more analytics. So I went to work for the Air Force. That was actually surprisingly very similar to startups, right? You have something that doesn't exist yet, it needs to be developed, and you need to go ask, in this case, Congress for money to do it. So kind of very similar, but only in the public sector. And now full-time, I work as an angel investor. I am in charge of deal flow for Golden Seeds in Boston. That is an angel group that only invests in female-led companies. And I also work a lot with Tech Coast Angels. They're out of San Diego. They focus a lot on the West Coast, but they like to see deals from all over, and they're quite a large angel group. So that's me.
And then you and I are also part of Beacon Angels, which is how I met you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Great. Well, I'm very excited to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, I love this space. I love the fact that we are the nursery for innovation in this country. And if you go to other countries, you realize how lucky we are here in the US. And this is part of what makes our country move along a lot faster, is that we have a lot of people who take their money and they invest it in more job creation, more innovation, pushing technology forward. So I think this is rewarding on a lot of levels.
Awesome. So again, Denise, thank you for joining us today. So on kind of the heels of what you were just saying with respect to there being just this plethora of entrepreneurs out there who are looking to kind of get some dollars to create, the next, Facebook or the next Tesla, creating jobs and opportunity out there for people and certainly fulfilling their dreams. It's not always easy getting in the door. And so I think our first question for you would be, what is it that gives investors pause? What is it that is the path to getting your knock answered when you kind of pitch or propose your technology, your company to an investor or an angel for that fact? Love to hear kind of, a few of your thoughts on how do I get a response?
Yeah. I like to see things that are not just an incremental improvement. I want to see something that is kind of a significant change to the status quo, a significant answer to a pain point that is now. I don't want to see something that's just making something a little bit better, a little bit cheaper. There is a place for that, but I want to, when I see something that is really taking a big leap forward, that comes with risk. Sometimes there are things like the Ubers and the Facebooks where they have to create that market, right? And they really have to educate the investor as to this is why someone would invest in this. But as an investor, that's what really excites me more. You know, we always talk about, you know, are you investing in the jockey or the horse, right? Are you investing in the investment team or the idea, and which one is more important? I will say that you do get more attention as an entrepreneur if you come off as kind of confident, knowledgeable, but also humble and someone that you can work with. You know, you don't want to deal with someone who you feel like, as an investor, I don't want to deal with someone who I feel like I cannot give any feedback to, that they won't listen, that they can't hear. But I have worked with entrepreneurs that have pitched to me to get into the screening of one of my groups. And I say, make this change and that change, that change. And then a week later, they've made all of them. And that's really impressive when you see someone who can pivot, who can take advice and kind of make it work from there.
Because you also mentioned in your intro that you're in charge of deal flow at Golden Seeds.
Yeah.
And so I imagine that, and in addition, you're a part of 3 different angel groups. So what, as you're looking at all the different ventures in your screening, do you provide the courtesy of telling every single deal that comes your way, here are the changes you need to make in order to pass into the next phase? Or do you only do that for certain ventures that you see? And if it's the latter, what is it that makes you pause to even do that extra effort? Because I imagine your bandwidth is,
So there are situations when sometimes in Golden Seeds, we have what we call office hours. So that's when you get to meet with an investor and just it's whatever you want to talk about, whether it's your pitch or how do I put this, how do I position this product, that kind of thing. So in that case, they are asking for feedback. That's why they're there. But a lot of the times when it's just they're trying to get into screening, I always make sure to ask the entrepreneur first, like, do you want the feedback that I got from the group or that I see from this? And 99% of the time they say yes. Almost no one says no. I don't want to know what you think, that kind of thing. Sometimes you're giving feedback when the group when the offering has gone to due diligence and you've gotten 2 weeks into it and everyone's gotten cold feet, right? And then you have to go back to the entrepreneur who was thinking that you were going to give them some investment and say, oh, now that we've looked under the covers, we're not as interested. And that can be hard. There are definitely in investments, things that are hard nosed, like, I don't think this is going to go anywhere. There are other times when it's like, not now, get beyond the prototype stage and come back to us, let those first few customers mature and then come back to us, that kind of thing. Or, you said you're going to have $1 million of revenue next year, come back when you have the $1 million of revenue and then we'll talk. That's more for consumer goods, right? Of course, in healthcare, you're not expecting them to sell any product before you invest in them. But if it's, recyclable shoes, which seems to be I think I've seen probably a dozen pitches on companies that want to do recyclable shoes, then that's a situation where you tell someone, come back to me when you have $1 million in revenue, 1,000 customers, something like that. So, yeah, it does, you have to feel kind of connected to the entrepreneur to give them a lot more time. Other than that, sometimes I say to the entrepreneur, come back to me in 6 months and let me know how you're doing. Like, I get a lot of emails or newsletters or things like that. But if it's really significant, reach out to me by name and I will look at it again. And I have had people come back to me 1.5 years later because they feel like they have had a significant change and they want to tell me about it. So, and a lot of the times it's almost good to go in early to a group. And as long as the group, as long as there's not too much negative response, if you get told no in the beginning and you come back 1.5 years later, you're actually a little further ahead because the group is familiar with you and they're like, okay, I remember that. I remember we told her, see if you can figure out this engineering thing you weren't sure about and then come back to us with the answer. So
we got to jump to some other questions here, but just one, like in lieu of like an entrepreneur, setting up a tent out front of your office and constantly asking for a meeting, what is the one key piece of feedback or key that you would give to somebody around how to get in front of you in lieu of a warm introduction?
I like I may be crazy in this. I like to go to pitch contests. I like to see the entrepreneur perform under pressure, the pressure of, okay, pitch to me in 2 minutes, pitch to me in 5 minutes. I think when I see an entrepreneur go to that, do that extra work of signing up for those things, and I think it's also good for them because there's 100 of us on their phone. They're doing one pitch to get in front of 100 of, angel investors and micro VCs versus like one Johnny Appleseed and one by one. I also, if I hear that you've gotten kind of significant NIH funding, that also is, or SBIR funding, it doesn't have to be NIH funding. That also speaks loudly to me because I like to see entrepreneurs that aren't just coming and looking for money. They've put their own money in. They've found as much non-dilutive funding as possible. They've gone, if it's if it's a cancer drug or something like that, they've gone in front of those associations. They've found advocates within the group that they're ultimately going to serve. I like to see that kind of smarts. That tells me the entrepreneur is smart and driven.
So now moving into our second question. So our next question is about a good company versus a good investment. So there's a difference between a startup that is doing well as far as traction. So maybe they have initial revenue, et cetera, and one that's a good investment. So in a case like that, can you name a reason why you've personally passed, even though maybe a founder has been great, maybe they have a lot of traction with their clients, maybe they even have consistent revenue, and a reason why kind of investors in general may think a company is a good business, but not a good investment?
I will say investors in general, what I've seen is if the company seems too much like a family business, there's like a husband and wife working in it, there's like the daughter and her father and her brothers involved, that kind of thing. That kind of makes investors a little nervous because it's hard to fire your father or your husband or whatever, right? And so ultimately, and there's a whole other dynamic there that investors might not be able to see because of family relations. Similarly, if the company seems like a lifestyle company like this, all companies are their entrepreneurs' babies, so to speak, but ultimately you're going to need to let this baby grow up and let it go on its own. Now, as an investor, I want to know you're going to sell this company as soon as feasible, and not hold on to it or not let anyone else take it over because you're afraid of losing the nest egg for your family type of thing. The other thing is if the company is like has a nice to have product, but is not super needed in society, right? So so this tends to be a lot of food products. Food companies are like this. Some fashions, apps tend to be like this. Like, yeah, it's okay, but the person can let go of it just as easy and nothing, it doesn't have that stickiness, right? They can choose not to drink a certain kind of soda or not to put a certain kind of makeup on. There'll be something else they can do. Those type of companies, what you want to see is that they are in a market where there's a lot of acquisitions and someone will buy them early so that, so the acquirers get very excited about it and they will take it and blow out the distribution of it. But those are good companies. They make money, they have clients, the team is strong, but it's missing that little extra specialness that is what an angel investor wants to see versus what family and friends will invest in or a bank will invest in.
What I'm kind of hearing here is you're looking more for like a market need rather than like a market want. You're looking for something where the consumer really needs this product versus like a nice to have.
Yeah. I mean, what is that saying? You want something that's the oxygen, not the aspirin, right? You want the thing that they cannot live without versus the thing that will kind of ease a little pain for a little bit, but you can do some other things instead. Yeah.
So you also mentioned the word lifestyle business, and I mean, that can be a really long answer to define that, but do you have a high level sort of, how do you define a lifestyle business? And, you mentioned sort of maybe perhaps the angle of not wanting to let go or not, keeping it your baby, but I'm sure you've seen, because I know I've seen situations where the founder clearly wants to have a fundable, scalable venture, and they think that it is, but then investors have have a different definition of lifestyle versus scalable.
Right.
ventures.
So a lifestyle business by definition is something where the entrepreneur plans on making this their long-term gig, right? So the idea that the entrepreneur is making enough, plenty of money. Why would they go get another job? This is a fabulous job. So they're incentivized to keep going and keep setting the goalpost a little further along. Only if I can get it at this level and this level and this level. And it's like, no, you could probably sell it now. Sometimes their motivation is from VCs that want really big returns, right? And they have a lot of money that they can put into it. So they will, sometimes the angels and the VCs have, contrary motivations, because angels want our money back now so we can put it back into the system. And VCs want the really big hits for the limited partners, and they'll wait 10 years or 15 years to get it and keep funding and funding and funding. So a lifestyle business is one in which the entrepreneur wants to keep this business going, keep as its CEO or leader for a long term, and not just like, okay, now I can sell it so I can let it go.
So you mentioned something earlier that Isabelle and I were talking about, and you mentioned the jockey versus, so that comment of yours. So Isabelle.
Yeah, I'd love to ask this question. When you started talking about that, the difference between if you're putting the priority for the founding team, who's the group, who are the individuals, what are the backgrounds, versus the market. And I think we started to have that conversation as the answer to other questions of what are you expecting the founders to be as far as go-getters versus if you've seen like 9 or 10 recycled shoe companies, how do you know which one is really going to be the winner of the market? Is it going to be because everybody's trying to do recycled shoes, or is it because the founding team, that's presenting to you at that moment? Do you have a preference for how you select?
So empirically, this is based on my experience. I have seen more often than not really knowledgeable teams hit it out of the park and fast versus really good ideas. The other side of that is I've seen really good ideas that struggle to find the leadership to really fulfill them, right? So ultimately, you want them kind of neck and neck, right? You don't want an incredible team with a bad idea, or vice versa. You want a pretty good idea and a much better, and a little bit better team ultimately. Now the question is like, what makes a good team, right? It's not always the person has 6 exits and they've IPO'd 3 times, that's a serial entrepreneur truly, and someone who's been successful. But that doesn't mean that that's the only thing that makes a good team. A good team is, we can talk about this later. In my vision, a good team is diverse. I love diversity in teams. If I see, and I've seen this, really good entrepreneurs, but they all went to the same school. They're all about the same age. They all have a kind of the same work experience, that scares me, right? Because they may be all really smart, but they're all coming from the same groupthink. First-time entrepreneurs, people who surround themselves with very good mentors, very good board or advisors. I like to see that. You can have diversity in your board and advisors, and that will make up for lack of diversity in your C-suite. Coachable, people who do not panic under pressure, who just respond. It's not, COVID really separated the wheat from the chaff, where a lot of people, that was a panic for all of us, right? And everyone panics in the moment, but ultimately, how am I going to pivot? How am I going to get, if my technology is making better table reservations for restaurants, and COVID hits, suddenly no one can go to any restaurants anymore. Now I got to think of something else, right? And that's what I want to see, an entrepreneur who can think under pressure, can make up a new strategy, and then work that, even if kind of the whole world is shutting down. And it's not always going to be that big. Sometimes it's just, how do they manage their board? How do they manage the runway they have? How much money they have? When they've run out of people to pitch to, then what do they do?
And
things.
You were mentioning a couple of different industries, which kind of goes into the question that we want to ask. but, sort of tying into your investment thesis, you've already talked about consumer goods such as recycled shoes, but also all the way going to healthcare. Those are very different markets and industries that you'd have to have a little bit of knowledge about to, make sure that when you're doing the due diligence that you can understand where a founder's coming from and if the product is like actually going to work. And I was just wondering, like, it kind of mixing in with that is when you're looking at different industries, are there different aspects that you're expecting in the founding team? Do you want, for a more healthcare focused or technical, deep tech type company, do you want a more technical founder, more technical background team versus a more business oriented team? What's your sort of expectation on experience from those founders as far as like work experience, schooling experience, you were already talking about diversity to sort of fill in and work together, just mixing it all in.
So I've seen a lot of that, where sometimes the founder is the one with the technical knowledge. Sometimes the one with the technical knowledge says, you know what, I'm not really good at fundraising. I don't want to be involved with this. I'll do the technical side, and I'm going to find someone else who has the contacts and the connections and everything to do more of the fundraising. I think that's fine as long as it is clear and as long as both are really engaged. You don't want to see the technical person never show up to meetings, right? And then this poor business development CEO has to try to answer all these questions. But to that point, ultimately the CEO is the one who needs to answer most of the questions. If the thing that I see most with CEOs is they get very nervous around their financials, like asking them financial questions, which I guess as someone with a financial background, I think is like, that's the easiest part. But yes, you can have a CFO, but ultimately you need to speak to how the financial model works, and the kind of the first few levels of the technology, and if you then need to turn it over to your technical expert, you can absolutely do that. The other side of that is that I see sometimes CEOs who are technically very, amazing engineers, and it's clear that they don't have what it takes to be a CEO, and you almost breaks your heart because you're like, we need, to have an engineering brain is hard fought, like that's not easy either. And like, it's kind of like making a racehorse into a pony rides horse, like you want to, like everyone needs to be doing their job, the job that they're really good at. And so I've told a couple of more technical CEOs, if this is not what you want to be doing as far as raising money and answering investor questions, find someone who will, because you're not helping yourself, and you're actually probably better off just doing the engineering, the scientific, the therapeutic side, whatever it is, and then having someone else lead it. And you see that all the time where the founder is not the CEO, but they're CTO or CSO or something like that. And, and that makes sense too.
I wanted to kind of bring us to our final question to close us out. What is your personal investment thesis and risk tolerance, and how did you come to that? Did you know right away? Was it over a period of time where certain things didn't pan out and you changed a little bit, or it did work out and therefore you're very confident in that? You also have quite a diverse bit of knowledge and subject matter expertise, which not everybody has as an investor, right? And so I was just curious as to kind of like your lens.
I think like a lot of people, you start with kind of the industries you worked in. So for me, medical devices, formulation, and then, a little bit cybersecurity with the government. So you start there. You also naturally seem to gravitate to the things that are interesting to you. So, or if you have a pain point in that, right? So, I know investors who, they know someone with epilepsy, right? So they're always looking for the new drug that will help that, or the new device, right? For me also, women entrepreneurship, women leadership is important, right? So I'm naturally attracted to areas where that's featured. Then as you start investing more and more, you know, some of your rougher edges get knocked off. You see investments you put money in and they actually sell, and yet you don't get any money out because you were too early or the capital worked against you, or so that you have those kind of lessons where you're like, okay, well, now I need to know that I need to evaluate the valuation a little closer, and you look at the cap table better. I need to do a waterfall analysis on it. And then sometimes you learn about things that are hot, you know, the areas that are hot, and you try to learn as much as you can about them. For me, investment thesis, again, probably most important thing is diversified teams, not only gender diversified, but experience diversified as much as possible, ethnically diversified. I want to just see diversification within the team as much as possible. More brains coming at it from different walks of life has been shown to produce greater results, better results. They tend to be more resilient. They tend to shift faster, and they tend to, as far, you know, give you a greater return. I think we see that in the public market. CEOs that are women-led companies give you a statistically significant better return than male-led companies. I don't know why that is, other than they're just more diversified. What else do I look for? Again, I try to look for big markets. So, you know, something that's closer to $1 billion, maybe greater. If it's healthcare, I want to try to find something that's maybe a little bit bigger platform. So not just one bite at the apple, but many bites. You know, if it's a therapeutic, can they test for a number of different disease states, or is it just one? You know, is it speaking to some of the stress points that we have coming up in the future of the country, which is kind of what we're seeing now. Environmental stresses, resource limitations, issues with our supply chain, those are probably not going away. And so, you know, how do products answer those questions? I'm looking for that. And then, you know, I want a good feeling that an exit in 5 to 7 years is possible. You know, I want to see that this is a market where acquisition is common, where there's a lot of acquisition. There are a lot of people with wallets who will open it up, not just one. And because that also gives me a sense of there'll be a lot of bidders on this. I personally try to stay away from investing in safes. A lot of people are fine with that. I think there are better deals to be had, and I look for evaluations that are more reasonable, which is different for different areas of the country, right? I do a lot of investing in California, and if you go anywhere near Silicon Valley, it's crazy town up there. But if you're, you know, if you're other places or in the middle part of the country, the valuations tend to be a little more constrained. But
well, thank you so much. It was interesting that some of the answers that you provided on that actually made me think back to the question of, like, you know, a venture that might be earning revenue, might, you know, have had a lot of traction, but may not be something that an investor would invest in. So this conversation has been very enlightening for me as well. You know, even though I've been on both sides of the table and have been, you know, angel investing for the past, you know, 8 or so years. But it's just, you know, I think it's very beneficial to hear different points of views on, because I definitely, would it be fair to say, kind of on a parting note, that some of these factors related to whether it's a safe note, the valuation, or the exit piece of it, right? Whether or not that is something that one would invest in, because I think even if somebody wasn't attached to wanting to be the lifetime CEO, wanting to, you know, to have a venture that they then can, you know, get acquired, that may not be necessarily a choice of the founder. Any other final thoughts or questions from anyone?
Well, I just say thank you, Denise, so much for sharing your insights. It was very interesting, and, you know, I love the thesis.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
This is great. Need another 30 minutes, but thank you so much.
I know, right? There's so much to learn and so much to hear.
And everyone has the different, you know, comes from a different way. I could talk about this all the day. I love this world. You know, you're always 5 years out from reality. You're having to think ahead. And the thing you said about subject matter expert, you become very humble in this work because every pitch is something no one's ever thought of before. No one's thought, you may not know anything about, and you have to learn from kindergarten up what they're talking about. So
great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And that's it for today's Inside the Mind of an Investor.